Welcome to SIM-PAC Live. I'm your host, Geoff Matthews. Today we talk to Huon Hoogesteger, CEO and founder of Smart Commercial Energy. Welcome, Huon.
Hey, Geoff. Yeah, very well, thanks. How are you?
Now, since the last time I saw you in December, you've had a name change. Tell us all about that.
We were Smart Commercial Solar for 14 years. We were the first dedicated commercial solar company at the time. But as you know, things change. The market certainly changed a lot. And the name change came along with our upskilling over time. So we're no longer just selling solar, we're selling batteries, we're selling power quality, we're selling monitoring services, we're selling carbon reporting, we're selling battery trading. So our focus as a company has always been about improving our customers' business. We needed to reflect in our name that we were doing a lot more than just installing solar systems. And so Smart Commercial Energy was the right, not too distant, but the right fit for what we're aiming to do for our clients.
Yes. Well, since I've known you, and especially over the last two SIM-PAC Live Awards, I've looked at, you've won awards in both years. I've looked at what you do, and actually you're solving customers' energy problems. You're a solution provider, and you weren't just a solar provider.
Yeah, and it has been, I guess, we all have regrets in life, and one of them was boxing myself in with the word solar.
Yes.
Because we are so much more than that for our clients, and we're able to find things that other people haven't looked at. We pay a lot of attention to load shape, to how you use power over time, to what that actually means for your business. Maybe behavioural change. Obviously components like solar, like batteries, like power factor correction, power quality, all of those sorts of things.
I've got a question about leadership. You've been in this game longer than anyone else, 2012, I think. And so you've always been at the forefront of leadership. Does it get lonely out there? Is it hard? Sometimes do you get exhausted about being in that leadership position? What's it meant for you to look back after, in 2026, you look back at that whole journey?
That is such a good question. And I really appreciate it. It actually moved me to hear you ask that question, because it is sometimes a little bit lonely, even though you're surrounded by people. And I've got a great team of people here, and I work with great people. I've got good leaders inside the company. There is some sort of loneliness that comes. It's that 6 o'clock driving home after a day of dealing with some issue, And it's the question, who can I call? And I have found great camaraderie amongst people like you and other people who own their own businesses. And closing that gap of loneliness is very, very important, I think, for any business leader. I attend a number of business leader events, one every month. It was formerly called Tech and now called Vistage. I'm not advertising them necessarily, but I do meet with 13 business owners every month, and we talk about challenges and opportunities. And whilst everyone has their own business, we all experience the same frustrations, the same challenges, the same hurdles. But if you don't have that connection, you feel like you're alone, and it can be lonely. I really encourage every business owner to get together with other, or even not even a business owner, anyone in leadership. You need to find people who you can talk about your story with.
Yes, and because it's an easy place for people to take pot shots at you. You're putting yourself out there, and especially in sustainability, where the mountain that we've collectively got to climb is so big, it can feel daunting. Every day you wake up that you're fighting a battle. That's a huge task to get up and face every day. So, but well done to you. And I've just I'm just celebrating my 25th year of my branding consultancy that I started, and I've just written our brand story, looking back over 25 years. I've
Wow.
forgotten most of it, you know.
I think, I mean, I know your story from, having dinners with you and listening to so many of these stories. And I think that is one of the things that it's a bit of a compensation for the amount of pain and struggle that you go through in life, trying to get a brand up, to do business, to come up with innovative ways to help your clients. The compensation is that you do get some really exciting opportunities. You get to meet other people who have done amazing things. And for me, that's you and many of my other customers who've done like remarkable things. One of our clients is one of Australia's richest men. He's a multi-billionaire, amazing guy. Another guy, became the largest chicken farmer in Australia. An amazing guy. He's done amazing things. And there's not one particular path to success. Everyone's got their own personality and different traits and skills and a different route. But one thing that does always stand out is that those people are interesting. And I think interesting people do interesting things.
Yes, yes. I don't know where I read it, but I read it somewhere many years ago. Be interesting.
Yes, be interesting.
So, okay, commercial innovation. Over these years, especially when we go back, a lot of your innovation was about the economics and finance of the technology, wasn't so much the technology.
Yeah, we did. We definitely focused on outcomes, and we often say to our clients, we sell outcomes. We don't sell you a system. We do sell them a system. Of course, we're selling a system. It's a solar system. It's a solar and battery system. But no one actually wants to buy a system. People want to buy an outcome. And so we have always focused on what is the outcome from the effort that we're going to put in. What's the outcome of the money that you're going to spend? When are you going to get the money back? And that also changes the nature of our own view of what we're doing. If I was just selling a solar system, it would be very transactional. But we're not selling a solar system, we're selling an outcome. So it's no longer a transaction, it's energy over time and it's results over time to fulfill a promise that we've made to that client. And I think that's an important differentiator between some of the ways that our competitors have traditionally faced the market and what our whole team, my whole team, is invested into with our clients.
And look, let's talk about the big driver of, I think, of recent change, and that's the price of batteries coming down. And with that, I know there was a government subsidy driving it, but there's no way in 2012 you would have thought that people would be plugging in household batteries. Back in 2016, I thought we'd be plugging in fuel cells into our house, because no one saw the price of batteries coming down 96% in over those years. Tell us how it's changed your world, and it's changed the economics, but also importantly to me for businesses, the equation from being solar and renewable energy being a cost saver to potentially being a profit centre or an earner.
Yes. So, I mean, the first part of that really, that cost reduction of the hardware. Also, a big part of that cost reduction has been the usability or the ease of integration into a site. So, in former times we had to buy individual battery cells and then have an inverter and an energy management system and a whole bunch of switchgear. And that was complex, and I was using a bunch of different, unrelated parties to build a system that would do what I needed it to do. And now we're able to buy an all-in-one package from one manufacturer, and it's more or less plug and play. And that really has been a massive part of this. Ease of integration is a massive risk reduction and therefore cost saver. And then watching the actual individual cost of cells coming down, yeah, you're right. In 2016, I had no idea. At that time, I was forward projecting, what the market could possibly do. And at that time, I was still actually believing in the economics of nuclear power, because as a comparison, it being a very clean source of energy, putting aside their long-term waste, but I was thinking about clean energy. How are we going to have a better future in Australia? Solar and battery would be great, but they're too expensive. But now we're getting to a point where the cost of solar and battery, round trip cost, is coming into the low 20s, sometimes even below 20 cents a kilowatt hour, which is comparative in most cases with almost everyone's energy bill. And so to see the levelized cost of energy being the cost per kilowatt hour, basically being competitive with grid rates, or in some cases, or most cases now, cheaper, this is an incredible moment in time. And then to see the uptake of batteries and the necessary uptake of batteries for Australia's future, it's pretty exciting. And as I'm now 100% sold on the fact that the only future for energy in Australia will basically be the hydro that we have. Obviously, they're building Hydro 2.0 anyway, but it'll be the hydro that we have, a decent portion of wind, but mostly rooftop and ground mount solar and very, very big batteries. And there is no way that at the current trajectory, that over the next few years, we won't see Australia basically become a majority renewable grid. It's very exciting.
Huon, there's a strong view forming that the biggest potential energy generation resource that we have in Australia, untapped, is commercial roof space. Yeah. And I know that we were behind the world in commercial solar, and we're about world average now, whereas in terms of households, we're well ahead of the rest of the world. Are you seeing people eyeing their roof space now? Has the solar battery and the cost and is that starting to drive people to look at their own roof space?
Yeah, commercial's been a lot more difficult on the roof space. So the sort of feeling at the moment amongst people who sell into the commercial industrial market with solar has found it more difficult in the last year or two. The concept being that a lot of the easy roofs have been taken off, have already had a little bit of solar or had solar installed on them. It wasn't until I think about 2019-20 that the Australian standards started to change in terms of structural engineering. So we've got a lot of legacy buildings that can't actually host a huge amount of solar because they're built within a limit of their structural capacity just to hold themselves up. So right. Australia, unlike parts of Europe where you have snow loading, so parts of America you have snow loading on that building, and there's plenty of capacity in terms of adding new weight. So there's some sort of physical challenges to rooftop solar in commercial, but there's really the biggest challenge is actually around 75, I think, % of commercial rooftops are rented, or commercial premises are rented. The landlords have no real driver or incentive to adopt rooftop solar because ultimately it's the tenant that saves the money. So they build these really cheap buildings that just are good enough to hold themselves up, to retrofit and to put solar on it. They're like, well, why should we bother? So there also has been zero government incentive around really commercial rooftops. But all that being said, the negatives aside, the biggest opportunity to move the needle in terms of renewable energy in Australia is that commercial rooftop.
So, Huon, are you seeing any businesses in those situations where they can't put solar on the roof actually evaluating the economics of a battery to be able to buy solar when it's cheap, negative pricing during the day, and selling it back to themselves when it's expensive?
It's definitely a big mover right now. the reality is, up until about, I would say, up until about 1.5 years ago, maybe 2 years ago, there wasn't really a facility to do it well. There were a few incumbent players, Momentum, HydroTaz, who were starting to talk about this with potential clients, but the proof wasn't there that it was actually able to work. That is, having a battery that can play into the spot market to buy cheap energy when the spot is low, to sell into the high-priced market events, and to use the power on site. So part of my earlier comment about battery integration and utilization of that battery being a key driver of the uptake, part of that is the ability, the software platforms and the market mechanisms where very small players can aggregate their batteries together and start to participate into that spot market. So it's kind of like a meeting of the minds across, both the technology providers, the software platforms, and the market itself coming together. Batteries are definitely now the flavour of the month, and solar is less interesting, and batteries, everything's about batteries.
Yeah.
It's pretty exciting.
And the future for you, or where you see this rolling out in the short, medium, long term?
I think that battery's going to have its day in the sun for a little while, but then it's going to come back to a more even playing field between generation and storage. So at the moment, we know that the Australian market has experienced a huge amount of solar intake. In fact, our biggest peak that we had in the grid the other day was 38 gigawatts. I don't know did you see that?
No,
So
I've seen so many. I've seen so many come one after another.
Yeah. Well, this is, that level of energy consumption on an Australian grid is unprecedented. And it's about 30% higher than our previous peak. So massive increase.
Yeah.
Which is, great for everyone in the industry. But at that peak, 49% of the energy was being created by solar, which is incredible.
Yes.
So, there's a lot of solar out there, not enough storage, not enough. There's about 30% of solar is curtailed on these very, very sunny days, and so we need something to absorb that power. Storage is that, but then there's a certain limit where storage suddenly becomes, we've got all the storage we need, and now we need more generation.
Yes.
It's also interesting to see the changing profile of revenue. So in the early days of batteries, and I know it's weird, it's like talking about the good old days when batteries are really only 5 years old. But in the early days of batteries, the guys making the most money were batteries who would play into the short-term market, the FCAS market particularly. And that's how the Hornsdale battery paid itself off in 2.5 years. $100 million paid in 2.5 years by playing in that very short market.
Yeah.
And then for the last little while, we've been installing 2-hour batteries.
Some would say gaming that market.
There you go. It's all a game. The whole thing's it's a game, and unfortunately, there's a loser, and that's the consumer.
Yeah.
So if you're not being a consumer and a producer, you're a loser in the game.
Yeah.
That's why we encourage our clients to start playing. So 2-hour batteries became the thing that they were making a lot of money. But as you start, that 2-hour window, that's really actually quite a short window. So these high-priced market events that the 2-hour battery is now satisfying aren't there long enough to meet the 4-hour window and the 8-hour window.
Yes.
So what we're going to see over time, over the next few years, is that the longer duration batteries will be the ones making more money because those high-priced market events get pushed back later.
And what will happen too is our definition of storage will start to broaden. I gave a speech to the Asia Pacific Energy Leaders Summit in New Zealand 2019, and I said back in those days the cheapest household battery you could buy, especially for New Zealand, was a second hot water cylinder.
Totally.
$1,200, because that's what we use our energy for: heat water and heat people in New Zealand. That's it. And so thermal storage will come on. Also, partly finished goods. That is, it is process energy storage. That is, using the energy when it's plentiful to partly manufacture goods, and that redeploys capital. So what I'm talking about here, so people can follow me, is like, instead of we've had this run one machine 24/7 relatively slowly so it doesn't break, and that will be replaced by running two machines 12 hours a day relatively fast. And the economics of that will start to change those old economic paradigms, and the old word of stockpiling, which become evil in the word in just in time manufacturing, will start to actually make sense over the longer term when you take the energy component of it.
Well, I think certainly for manufacturers, their top three overhead is one of those top three is going to be energy. I was speaking to a business friend of mine who in 2019's energy bill was $35,000 and in 2025 it was $135,000. So you can see the impact that energy costs are having on manufacturers.
Yes.
And that's because manufacturers haven't yet, particularly manufacturers, but heavy users in that small to medium business range haven't yet realized that they can do something with energy, that they can manipulate how they use it. They need to pay attention no longer just to peak demand, they need to pay attention to load shape. And I spend a lot of time talking to customers about shape. And we can reshape quite often, like you're saying, you can reshape your loads. If you're a timber mill, you can run a couple more shifts in the middle of the day, run a couple more saws, and it will cost you nothing to run those saws because the daytime cost of energy is zero.
Exactly. You've got to start with the question to the engineers and the people. You've got to say, what would you do with 5 hours of free power each day or free energy each day?
That's a very good question.
One of the speeches I gave, and you'll like this because I know you like these things, I showed it was in Brussels. And my last slide was a washing machine. It was actually a Fisher and Paykel washing machine from New Zealand. And I said, does anyone know why that slide's up there? And of course, nobody did. And on the dial, it's got the manufacturers put a delay time on it that you can delay the wash by 3, 6, 9, 12 hours. So they understand the customer's need to shape the load. That you can put the washing machine on, it'll come on during midday when you're at work. Or in the middle of the night if that's where the cheapest power is. But I stood there with the engineer from the company, and the factory had no ability to shift its load. So they were building a washing machine knowing the importance of load shifting, but the factory couldn't shift the load.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Because like intuitively, people are doing this at home, especially homeowners who get a bit of solar on, they start running things in the middle of the day, and then they come to work and they just do BAU, business as usual. Let's not mess with it.
Yes, but even downtime and closing a plant for maintenance and things like that, you've got to look at when the energy is most volatile and why don't we do it in those months? All of that sort of thing has got to come into place. And I think the conversation, I'll just sort of sum that up, is that once we get, we sort of ride this wave of chemical battery installations, we'll start to broaden our scope on what is storage.
Yeah, it's definitely a broader conversation, shape, storage. I mean, storage can be, hydrogen ultimately is not an energy source, it is a storage mechanism for energy. There's inertia energy and flywheels and other things that have different qualities. I think everything's got a quality about it. There's a reason why some of these technologies exist. And ultimately it's got to come back to something that's financially viable. And some of that's to do with scale. Some of that's got to do with the ability to integrate it. But I would say that 30% of most loads are about shape and behavior. And just let's think very practically about what we do, and then potentially investing in that new machine to do the work in 5 hours instead of 10,
Yes.
is going to be a great investment for that company and increase its ability to do more work if they have to do that 10-hour shift.
Yes. Yes.
I think one of the challenges that we've got as an industry and as the consumer of energy, both sides have the same challenge, and the challenge is that we need to be able to stop and consider the issue, and that costs time and money. And smart commercial solar and smart commercial energy, as it is now, because we're getting into more and more detailed engineering, it's costing time and energy to find the nuance, to find the opportunity to save you more money. And that represents a risk to us and how we treat our clients. And I can understand why our competitors just sell a product in a box. Here's a solar system, and then they don't want to know about it anymore. Or here's a battery, and see you later. There's a lot of that box selling going on, but it's gonna end up being ultimately, typically it ends up in disappointment because it's kind of taking that fast sales approach rather than a detailed look. So I think consumers should be thinking, how do I get the most out of my load and the opportunities, being solar battery and other things, and then just taking the time to actually explore it properly with experts, rather than just going, oh, I saw Mrs. Jones down the road got a solar system, I want one too.
Yes. And asking those, asking them to look at the economic paradigms that their business has been built around for 40 or 50 years. They were built up under fossil fuels when power was relatively cheap and available 24/7, and we need to re-examine all of those. And I'm sure it's an area that fascinates me, and I'm also sure that a lot of what's stopping return on investment is human behaviour.
Totally, of course. We're always we're short-sighted quite often as well.
You might have to bring a psychologist on in your sales team, start to work out what's going through there. Well, and sometimes it's buried in there, that in the mid-level of companies where the management just don't want to change because they don't want to change. It's because all changes requires work.
Have we got more lazy? We're probably the same level of lazy as we always were. But yeah, one of the keys that I've focused on over my whole career, to make it easy for our client, it's about learning the language of that client.
Yes.
Energy companies, we speak in kilowatt hours, kVA, capacity charges, demand charges, levelized cost of energy, LCOE. It's a bit like the banking sector. They talk about, everyone's got, every industry has its own language, acronyms, and quite often that can be bamboozling. So a challenge for us is to, and something I think we've done well, is we've made the complex simple and translated what seems to be complex into a language that the customer can understand. So one of the first things I do when trying to understand my client, if they're a builder or a developer, they talk about cost per square meter, because they think about rent per square meter, they think about building cost per square meter. And I'll give you a good example of that. We're working on a very large factory in Western Sydney for Lint, actually. And I got to work with the developer prior to development, and we worked on the structural, and you said, this site could fit 2 megawatts of solar on the roof, which would have been perfect for the future factory inside. That translated into whatever the cost was per square meter over the 20,000 square meter site. And then the builder got in and value engineered, which is a building term, value engineered the building, which means basically reduce the cost of the building. And how do they reduce the cost? By reducing the steel. How do they reduce the steel? By bringing down the structural capacity.
So you could put the 2 megawatts on the roof.
So we could end up fitting 400 kilowatts on the roof.
Yeah.
I can show you some images of that. And very disappointing for the client long term, right? Because no longer could we actually fit that 2 megawatts in the roof. Now, that value engineering saved the builder and the developer $19 per square meter in the total build in
Yeah.
steel. They forego $40 per square meter per year in return on investment.
Yes.
And so if I'd had the opportunity to have that conversation with the right
They'd have
person
paid
at
for
the
it.
time, I could have explained it to them. Now it's too late. That roof's done. To retrofit the roof would cost $100 a square meter to retrofit
Yeah.
strength. So that's done. But it just shows you, like, yeah, the concepts, language, and making sure that we can actually translate that that message right through to the end user, because OPEX now overtakes CAPEX.
Yeah. It's a good example. It's a very good example to finish on. Huon, it's been great talking to you. Good luck this year. I'm sure your change of name is just really, I think everyone thinks of you as Smart Commercial Energy anyway. I think they've realised you've been solving their energy problems for a long, long time. And good luck, and we will see you at a SIM-PAC event somewhere along the line.
Yes. Thank you, Geoff. I love what you do. What SIM-PAC is, and the people that I have met at your events, they're so valuable, great people, very interesting, as we started out saying.
Yeah.
They're interesting people doing interesting things. And the alignment and the discovery that we get from what you've put together is really brilliant. I just hope it gets bigger and bigger, and I wish you all the success in 26 as well.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Huon.